Hi, I'm Elaine, and this is my channel for adult children of alcoholics for emotional sobriety and recovery. I welcome you today, and if you're just joining my channel and you've never seen any of these, you probably want to go back to the earliest videos, start with even before step one, because I have some introductory material. Just find the oldest videos. Look at the Serenity Prayer because it's a really good framing of how you want to think about recovery and what you can control and what you can't control. It's a wonderful idea that we can discern what we have control over and what we don't have control over, and as a way of not wasting our time in a sense, and of not grieving over things that are past or that have to do with other people that we can't hold accountable for ourselves. So I have three. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, 2 years ago, I made a relationship worksheet. It's part of step 4. That's exercise 7. I did link to it in the previous video on the exercises 6, I think, and something else. But I would say go and look at exercise 7 if you haven't. That's an important one. That's the relationships worksheet. Now, I also thought that I would power through, what a thing to say, but that I would power through step 4 like these last exercises, because it's really just exercise 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. It's actually 5 exercises. It's quite a few. But no, step 4, you cannot take a shortcut. You can't do a shortcut to emotional sobriety. You can't recover from this lifetime of trauma that you have been experiencing, reliving, perhaps in denial of, whatever it is. It's in there kind of deep, and there's no shortcut. And even today, what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to have to be abbreviated about it. And so I always encourage you, almost in every video, I'm going to say that you should get yourself the Big Red Book. It's something that it covers so much, and adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, go to adultchildren.org. I am not affiliated with adultchildren.org. It is a wonderful thing in that it's not hierarchical, and so I don't want to try to pretend to represent it as a ambassador or something. When you go to a meeting, you realize everybody has a voice, and nobody is the authority figure in that, but there's the body of wisdom that's in the book. So it's usually, that's the idea. It is your recovery. You take responsibility for your recovery, and there's no guru or anybody to tell you what to do with your own recovery. So, but there's a lot of good advice. The book is great. If you're working the steps with me, also on the same site, you can get the 12 steps of adult children. Now, this is my copy. It's a little older. I don't know if it's updated, if it's still yellow, but you know it's a workbook for the 12 steps. That's all you have to know. And see if you can find that on the adultchildren.org website. The prices aren't too bad considering what it might cost to buy books in a bookstore today. So look for the literature. It's really helpful. And a third thing I want to tell you about, and I'm going to confess to not having read the whole thing, but being familiar with parts of it, and it's something that probably I should, get around to reading it. But it is called The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. So much of what we're going to cover today and in the next video, because I cannot possibly do all those exercises, is going to be mostly 8 and half of 9 exercises, okay? But this one is really great. It does talk about different methods to use to release trauma from the body. There's physical trauma. We eventually heal from that. We don't heal a lot of times completely from our emotional and our stored trauma, and it stays in our body. It might manifest in the throat, the stomach, and the arms. I would also suggest now, and also the workbook suggests that you do some body work like deep massage. I think yoga was very helpful. I noticed that, like, when you get in certain poses, sometimes you have trauma stored in certain joints and certain places, and you might shake. Now, you might do that just because your muscles are not ready for the yoga pose, but there's also this, it feels as if that's where the trauma maybe exists that you have not released. So, light yoga, yin, what I would suggest it would be yin yoga mostly, which is the seated or floor exercises, the exercises that are not so much balance, standing up in difficult poses. But anyway, very good for your body, but also helps in a little bit of understanding your body, where the pain is, where you're holding in trauma. Okay, enough preliminary. For the relationship worksheet, I think that's number 7. Go to the link, and I think I have it on the other video as well. And that's an older video, but I think it's really comprehensive. I think you probably get a lot out of it. But we're starting with exercise 8 today. Let's see. Okay, so this is the sexual abuse inventory. Following this inventory is a gentleness break. That is how serious this step is, or this exercise in this step 4, because my experience, and I stay confidential, and I don't, you don't really know people's names anyway, but when you go to a group, if there's somebody who has shown up and mostly their trauma is sexual abuse, this is a very brave thing for them to show up at an ACA meeting, and some of the hardest stuff to recover from, because it's such there's sort of a splitting of what life is supposed to be and what you're enduring, and even what you're told about what that event means. It's really something that I suggest you do the work, but maybe seek a therapist, a psychotherapist. Avoid just drugging yourself. Avoid being medicated when you need actually to feel some of these things. But that's why we have the gentleness break, because sometimes it's a lot at once. But nowhere does ACA tell you to numb your feelings. Now, this is part of what our problem is in recovery, is numbing it with alcohol, with narcotics, or with just addictive behaviors, or with relationship behaviors like relationship addiction, love addiction. We don't want to numb anything, but we don't want to suffer needlessly either. When we revisit, we want to understand that we're going to name emotions and understand emotions and learn how to reframe and let things go. So today, the sexual abuse worksheet, it's described on page 90, and the worksheet is on 91 of this workbook. So I'm going to cover it in, like I said, an abbreviated way, because I honestly am not an expert at all in these matters, and although I did have some of this experience, I realized that it was much worse for other people. Now, a word about that. If you were sexually abused at all, even just with words, you should not say, well, other people had it worse, or I wasn't raped, or I didn't suffer from incest or anything like that. Sexual abuse is, whatever form it's in, can be very harmful, and especially because we're really going to be looking at your childhood in this exercise. Sexual abuse it's different levels, obviously, for different people, depending on what they've experienced. For a man, there's shame no matter what, but for a man, it can be extremely painful, because it may hurt their feeling about their manliness, or their virility, or their their sexual orientation. They might be very confused about that. And it might be something that, a man is not free to talk to another man about. So for a young man experiencing sexual abuse, that is, I'm not saying it's more so than for a female, but just that might be different. For a young woman, the abuse, there might be something like, well, you deserved it because you look this way, or you did this, and I have to do that. Or I have to give you experience because when you go out in the world, you're going to have, this, and so I'm helping you have experience, or some kind of thing like that, or in a threatening way. If you tell anybody, I will kill you, I will hurt you, or you will lose your family, or something like that, or I will hurt your family. So the pain associated, because an adult knows that they're doing something wrong to you when they're sexually abusing you. They know it, and they will try to frame it like it's your fault. But they know that they're doing something wrong, and so they have to use deceptive language, or threaten in some way to get away with that particular thing. And when you're really young and you think adults are, well, that they know everything and they're important and they must know better than you. Well, as a child, you it's hard to stand up to that and just to say, I'm sorry, but this is my body, don't touch it. We might be taught at a very young age by our parents to watch out for that, to be careful that we are not abused. And I think that's really important. That's empowering. I don't think it should be like overemphasized, or I don't think children should be over sexualized or have too much introduced to them, but just very basically what the boundaries are with your body and another, even if it's a family member. But again, this is not my area of expertise. I did have some experiences, and I had to take that when I did the steps myself seriously, and I think you should, no matter to what extent you suffered. So let's just go over the way the worksheet looks. The columns are very long, and I think I'm going to have to back up a bit for you to see them. All right. Alrighty. So each of these in green has a little black slash. So that's kind of, if you were making your inventory, okay, you have columns, but these are very kind of long categories for the columns. Anyway, there they are. One is the abuser. Now again, you don't have to share this in an ACA group. You may not feel comfortable at all. This is a very private matter. You can allude to it perhaps, but you need to be careful how much you want to share. The abuser, that's a powerful thing, just the name of the person, putting that person down, okay? And we're not going to go after this person. This might be somebody that we will never talk to again or see, and that's fine. We're not even interested right now in forgiveness or anything. We just want to get this part done, okay? So the abuser's name. We'll have what happened. Again, you don't have to go into detail if that's too triggering, but you might want to privately, or it depends on what you want to do. But what happened? It could be more of a, where were you, in what room, and just some allude to what happened, what words were said. So even though you're going to have these columns, I would say it might not be enough room to explain the story. You might want to tell this more as a story, but just be sure to complete all this. So in some of these, we have these columns, but you could be writing paragraphs and just refer to the columns to make sure that you're getting it all in. So we have the abuser, what happened, my age. Very important, because we have different ways of conceptualizing what has happened to us when we're very young, We might have feelings about ourselves that are different than when we're older. Because when we do get to a certain age, we do guess that this is wrong and this adult is doing harm to us. We might even be confused with this as love, which might be one of the things that the abuser says. This is me expressing love to you. Or we have a relationship, or this is our secret together. And it might be that in order to normalize it, the person who's been abused begins to think of it in these ways that are not, especially if it started as a child, and it evolves. Boy, you have got to try to figure out how to survive it. And this was appropriate when you were younger, like calling it love, or saying you had a relationship, or saying, well, nobody understands as me as well as this person who's your abuser. So that it's kind of frightening to think about that you might have to do that as a child and as a young adolescent. You might have to, in order to cope, to not just go nuts, make up these excuses or have this denial. But you do have to understand at some point and look back on it and realize all of this was wrong, and it wasn't love, and it wasn't the kind of relationship that you would want to have as an adult, and it was not for your benefit in any way. It was for the benefit of the abuser, whatever benefit that person thought they were getting, which was very selfish, of course. So anyway, we put what the abuser, what happened, my age, who I told or did not tell. Now, sometimes we just don't say anything, but who should we have spoken to? Would we have felt safe doing that? Because that's also part of the trauma. The trauma is the sexual abuse, and then the second part of that trauma is the fact that we have to be the strong one, and we have to tell somebody what happened. And sometimes that is just not something that we ever want to tell. Because, well, first of all, might have been threatened if we do. But would the person that you're telling, the person that should be protecting you, let's say, would that person even believe you? Would it seem outrageous? A lot of times people say kids make stuff up, they just have wild fantasies. But what would lead a kid to have a fantasy like that? That's not something that just comes naturally from a kid to invent a sexual exploit. Not unless they've been, I guess, exposed to porn or something. But it would be really hard to imagine a child just coming up with these things, because that's not what children fantasize about when they're young. They fantasize about being princesses, or brave warriors, or something else, but certainly not this kind of thing. So an adult that doesn't believe you, well, that's another trauma. And they might not want to believe you because, well, let's say if it was a father or a brother, a family member, and you had to tell your mother, or if it's your mother abusing you and you have to tell a family member, the father or something, they might feel harmed by it. And they certainly are. But in other words, they might see it more in terms of, oh no, my marriage is going to collapse if I talk about this, or I do something about this, or this just makes my family not a safe place to be, and I can't take sides, or whatever it is. So all these things can come up. Again, like I said, maybe writing this more in a paragraph form, but making sure to have all the parts, because it's really, really a lot of thoughts that go through your mind when you're revisiting these traumas. Okay, so there is who got blamed. Now, after all this is done, what the abuser told you, oh, it's because you wore this, you look like that, or you stall around, and I'm by myself and I can't help myself, and it's your fault. What a terrible thing for a young child to and they will, and children will believe those things. Adults tell them things and they will believe it. It's important that you know that, of course, I mean, you know it's true that this is not your fault in one sense, but there's also this stuff that lingers, that stays like, well, it's kind of my fault, or maybe it was a little bit my fault, because we had to be in denial so long that we began to take on those lies that we were told about what this meant. Okay, let me see. Now we have how did the abuse stop? So sometimes it lasts until we move out of a home if it's an incest, um, or it or that person leaves, or they're arrested, or that person sometimes is harmed in some way, like threatened. I will kill you if you come near my daughter or my son again. There are a lot of compelling reasons for an abuser to go. Sadly, they will go to somebody else. Um, Again, when we get to the point of talking about letting things go and forgiving, and I don't even want to say forgiving at this point, but um, so much. But I want to say that there is the court system, and this might be the appropriate route, but and I don't know what the statute of limitations is in. I don't know if it's by state, but it might not even be a statute of limitations. And maybe I should look that up, but I'm not a lawyer. I haven't thought of it in those terms. But getting redress still will not help with the trauma and what is stored in the body, and what the brain continues to revisit. So it is going to be important. It's important to go to the courts or to try to seek justice if you can, but it's also important to understand that there's still going to be that trauma inside of you. So okay, let's go on. Um, but you have to remember, it's not your fault. And whatever your age, it's not your fault. Or even what you did, it's not your fault. If it was what we would call abuse, it can be just abusive language, and it goes on and on and on. And somebody can frame it that you needed to know that, you caused whatever it was, and just remember, it's not my fault. I used to, not related to sexual abuse so much, but other things wherein I wanted to blame myself. And the messages that I got from whatever abuser it was, um, I would begin to like hear that voice of the abuser. It's not my voice inside my head. It's actually like the abuser's voice that I've adopted as like a parent, I guess, as an authority figure. And I would repeat to myself, I'm a good person. It's not my fault. I didn't cause this. It's not my fault. I'm a good person. It's not my fault. And that it's kind of helpful, because you need to sometimes even speak it out loud, that it's not your fault. You need to hear your own voice telling you it's not my fault. Okay, we have, let's see, and ACA and the workbook says seek professional help. Again, not help to numb everything, but help like good talk therapy, somebody you trust. It's important. If you need to speak to a certain gender, you feel more comfortable, then ask for that. If you need a woman therapist or a male therapist, or somebody maybe even of a certain age, that's okay. You need to vet and make sure that you have somebody that would take you seriously, listen, and has some expertise maybe in body work. So, so I don't pretend, excuse me, on this channel to be able to do any of that. But I try to point you to, like the book I said, The Body Keeps the Score. Um, And I think there might be exercises in the big red book that are a bit more specific. So take a look at that. And there's a wonderful index in the back. It should help you maybe look up body work and see what you can, what kind of resources there are. And there's some good YouTubers out there that can talk about these things. Maybe they have a lot more expertise in this than I do. Okay, finally, okay, I want to talk about the gentleness break. Wow, there are a few of those in this program. A gentleness break is usually in the form of a prayer. So we've talked about that. We've talked about what it means to pray and maybe our supplications to God, but it can also be to what we call a higher power. However you want to think about this, it is helpful when there's too much on you to put it somewhere. Maybe not on another human being right now, because sometimes it's just too much for your friends and even your family. But you want to be gentle to yourself. Sometimes it means putting it over here. If you could even visualize some, again, remember we talked about becoming your own loving parent. It may be a bit much for you to conceive of yourself as that loving parent right now, but maybe you can develop that and say, talk to yourself. Maybe write yourself a letter, write a letter, and then have your parent, your loving parent, respond to it. Whatever works. If you're comfortable with prayer, if you want to address that to God, then do it that way. That's very helpful for a lot of people. So, what they ask you to do in here, I think it's really nice, as to read the ACA promises. So I'm going to read those to you. I'm not going to comment on any of them. I'm just going to read them to you and think of these in the form of a prayer. And I think this is what is supposed to be, this is what it's supposed to look like when you have successfully worked the program. We will become, we will discover our real identities by loving and accepting ourselves. Our self-esteem will increase as we give ourselves approval on a daily basis. And oh, I will interrupt this. A lot of the exercises are actually dealing exactly with the wording in these things, and the steps, in the promises, in the laundry list, in the solution, in all those, like 4 lists or 5 or something. Read them and you'll notice as you go through the steps that little pieces of those sentences show up in the work that you're doing. Fear of authority figures and the need to people please will leave us. Authority figures. 4, our ability to share intimacy will grow inside us. 5, as we face our abandonment issues, we will be attracted by strengths and become more tolerant of weaknesses. I will want to talk about this one, but I think in a previous video, if you look at the ACA promises, I addressed number 5, tolerant of weaknesses. What does that mean? So we might get to it. 6, we will enjoy feeling stable, peaceful, and financially secure. So, I mean, it's interesting, even money. We will learn how to play and have fun in our lives. We will choose to love people who can love and be responsible for themselves. 9, healthy boundaries and limits will become easier for us to set. 10, fear of failure and success, will leave us as we intuitively make healthier choices. 11, with the help from our ACA support group, we will slowly release our dysfunctional behaviors. And 12, gradually, with our higher power's help, we will learn to expect the best and get it. You could start each of these with God or loving parent or higher power. Help me to discover my real identity by loving and accepting myself. Father, loving parent, higher power, our help me to increase my self-esteem and give myself approval on a daily basis. So you can take each of those statements and restate them as a supplication, as asking, as praying for, as supplication for those feelings and those realities that you would like to experience emotionally in your life when you are emotionally stable and have emotional sobriety. Okay, let's go on. I'm going to check the time. Looks like we're already to a half an hour, so just a little bit more. And there's 2 parts, and I can only get to one part of exercise 9. It is a denial inventory, and you will see that the denial inventory is so much like other things. Here's what I want to say about repetition in ACA. Absolutely, things will, like, you'll put the same things again and again, but there's a different spin on each of these exercises. And so rather than thinking, well, I've done that already, start to work through the exercise and see if the way it's framed, or even just because now you're revisiting something again, you might see more in it or more deeply into it. So denial worksheets, kind of what has come up in our stored anger and resentment video of a couple videos ago, because part of that is there's a denial component in the stored anger. And so it kind of makes you think about, this other exercise when you do this one, but don't not do it because it seems similar. There's also the family secrets. Oh my goodness, this one, denial, is what the family secrets is about. Again, a previous video, a couple more before that, talking about how there's conception of the family that the family or our parents or whoever it is want the world to see. But we incorporate it as our own. We begin to think those things about the family, which is maybe distinct from what really was going on in our family. So again, denial inventory. And this is about your parents' behavior. The one that we're not covering today is about your behavior. The painful thing about looking at our own harms. And there's another one. We did the harms worksheet. And that's going to be kind of like the next one that, the next video. But whatever it is, we want to move out of denial. And if that takes several different exercises with a slightly different spin, then so be it. I think it's great. And I can't tell you except you're going to be done with step 4 pretty soon. But you really want to do it completely, right? You want to do a good job. You don't want to have things lingering that you didn't seem to cover or resolve. A lot of this is by repetition, it becomes more a part of you and your recovery. All right, the worksheet asks you to do these things, and I think I'm going to just read the columns, make a brief comment, and we'll end the video. I don't want any of my videos to be too long because I want to give you just enough to kind of munch on, and then the next thing comes in another video. So, and this is a heavy, this is because I refuse to use all the good technology. I have these heavy boards. My parents' behavior. What happened? We probably covered this already, but maybe there's more. An interesting thing that came up when I was reading the yellow workbook. This is why yellow workbook is good. Sometimes things done to us that we're in denial of is we observe things that happen in our family that aren't necessarily directed at us, like abuse of a sibling by a parent, or 2 parents fighting, or one parent abusing another. That is an action against you because you have to endure it. Some of us, that's more of what we had, and that definitely makes us adult children to observe our parents arguing and fighting and abusing each other, or our siblings being abused, or other just conditions in the house. But things that are not necessarily directed at us are definitely felt by us in the household. So what happens? So it could include those things that happen to you personally, or just things that were in your sphere. Okay, your age. Again, the age is important because it informs us as to how we might have thought about it or understood it. What I felt about what happened. The next exercises, well, somewhere, I think a couple exercises from now, we're going to really talk about feelings and what they mean. Um, okay. What was the parents' message about what happened? Now we're talking about denial. So they might give you a message about what happened. It might not necessarily be that true, or might be a distortion, might be a cover up. It might be part of that family secret, you know, program that you've been in. Okay. How I later described what happened. So I have, oh gosh, it's so heavy. I have written in a small paragraph. I would certainly go into more detail. Instead of doing these as columns, you could certainly do the columns. But what I'll just read to you because I'm tired of holding. You can look at it real quickly. You can, what you can do is you can make a screenshot if you want right now. The stuff in red. It's cursive, and I'm sure that that's okay for most people. When I was about 7, my mother, and then I give the memory of my mother. In this case, it would have to do with an outburst that she did in public. And that's all I'm going to go into about that. But it was really, she did this and she did that, and I would go into detail, and I'm writing this down. And I felt embarrassed. I would go more into why did I feel embarrassed? Well, who wants to be my friend in this place where my mother has acted out? Or why is it that I have to have a parent like this instead of like these other people that are in the scene who don't do that? You know, why did God give me defective parents? Why am I having to be the embarrassed kid of this parent's behavior? You know, I've done that before. And I go into detail about how that makes me feel about myself as I get older. Um, and I thought maybe I deserved it. Maybe somehow I deserved this thing that happened to me or that my parents did. I don't know. Fate, karma. I really have to talk to you about fate. Fate is, well, I don't believe in like fate in this way. Like we were supposed to feel this or this was just going to happen. In a sense, yes, because the cards were that our parents married each other and had us into this family, but it also does not, we don't have to internalize that as we deserved our fate. And then my father said, because we have to talk about how the parents' message was. And in this case, we'll just say the father said, you know, your mother, blah, blah, blah. She's, you know, and you got the impression my mother's defective. And maybe that wasn't the message that you should have heard. You should have heard the message that I feel bad for her. I'm trying everything I can. I want to get the appropriate help for my mother. Whatever the message was, maybe it was a message that wasn't, you know, very acceptable for healing. Okay, it was just like your mother's defective. You know, she's a bad person. But now I understand, and so boy, when we get older, we have these revelations about our parents because we become our parents. Or we become parents, we'll just say. We don't have to become our parents, but often we do. And we see that in our own adult lives. We understand things that we didn't understand as children. We understand how the world works. We understand how money works and how sometimes understand our poverty or understand how, like I said in the previous video, something about food and nutrition. We understand how we might make somebody feel a certain way and not consider that that has long-term consequences. And of course, the second part of exercise 9 is my own behavior. So I think that's a good way to kind of transition so that next week when we get to the second half of exercise 9, you can see how we continue to do this stuff. Doesn't have to be exactly what our parents did, but it can be in the spirit of it, where we, and again, it's like the harms inventory, but we're really trying to move out of denial. So we're kind of looking at it in a way of going forward, because as we finish step 4, we will have brought up as many things, uncomfortable things mostly, as we can, and we sit with those feelings a little bit, but we try to be gentle with ourselves. So okay, so I think I should probably end there. Next Friday I will get hopefully, unless something happens, I should be able to finish exercise 9. We should be able to move to 10, 11, and 12. Now 12 is great because it kind of ends with the idea that we can reframe what we think about ourselves, because we've had to deal with a lot of negative emotions about our lives and how we feel about ourselves, or how other people made us feel about ourselves. And in exercise 12, it's the praise work. So I'm going to really try in the next video to finish step 4 if I can. And I'll be honest with you, it really depends, because when I start to look through it, when I start to go through all this stuff and I read all the information, I see that there's so much to say, and I want to make sure that I can say something that might help you to see things in a new way. You'll say, oh, or aha. I always love it when somebody points out something. I like that you said this thing. That makes me really feel good. But it's not about me, it's about you. And please, whatever helps you, if it's not me and my channel, if there's another wonderful YouTube channel on ACA sobriety, if some of these other resources that I refer to, if those things help, please, anything that helps you. Okay, so I want to thank you for coming here today and entering my life, and I get to enter your life to the degree that you let me. Please like, subscribe, check below in the description. I think I'm going to put exercise 7 again in the description. I don't want to do it again right now. And I'll see you next week. Thank you for being here, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.